Imagine growing up in a world carved from stone, ice, and fierce seas, a place where every day was a fight for survival. The Viking Age was not just about raiders and warriors sailing into battle. It was a world where even children were shaped by the relentless demands of life in the north. Welcome to the story of how Viking kids were trained for war, not just with swords and shields, but in the endurance, skills, and mindset that defined their people. The Viking childhood context. When we think about childhood in the modern world, many of us picture classrooms filled with desks, teachers guiding lessons, playgrounds filled with laughter, and a relatively sheltered environment where play and education are carefully balanced. The days are often gentle and structured, with adults safeguarding children from many of life's harsher realities. Viking childhood, however, was a starkly different experience, shaped by a rugged environment, harsh realities, and a culture that demanded strength, resilience, and loyalty from the very beginning. From the moment a child was born, their life was intertwined with the unforgiving landscape and the ever-present demands of survival. Life in a harsh land. The Viking homeland spanned the cold and rugged territories of Scandinavia, Norway's fjords, Sweden's dense forests, Denmark's coastal plains, and the remote islands of Iceland and Greenland. This environment was beautiful but unforgiving. Long, bitter winters blanketed the land in snow and ice, while summers were short and unpredictable. The soil was often thin and rocky, making farming a challenge that required relentless effort and ingenuity. Food was not abundant. It was a precious commodity, and every member of the community had to contribute to securing it. In this context, Viking families faced daily challenges that required strength, endurance, and resourcefulness. From birth, children were introduced to a world where comfort was scarce and survival demanded constant effort. They were not shielded from hardship but prepared to face it head-on. Strength, resilience, and loyalty, core cultural values. The values imparted to Viking children were inseparable from their environment and social structure. Strength was prized not only as physical power, but as mental and emotional fortitude. Resilience, the ability to endure hardship, to recover from loss or injury, and to persist despite adversity, was a defining trait of Viking society. Loyalty, both to family and community, was the glue that held people together in times of scarcity and conflict. These values were not abstract ideals, but practical necessities. Without strength and resilience, a person could not survive the brutal winters, the risks of seafaring voyages, or the dangers of battle. Without loyalty, clans would fracture, and communities would falter. Viking children were raised with the understanding that their actions had consequences not just for themselves, but for their entire kin. Learning from the land, the rhythms of nature. Unlike children today, whose understanding of the world often comes from books, teachers, and digital media, Viking boys and girls learned primarily through direct experience. From an early age, they were attuned to the natural rhythms around them. The changing seasons dictated the flow of life, from planting and harvesting to hunting and fishing. Children learned to recognize subtle signs in the environment that indicated weather changes or animal movements. They observed the direction of the wind, the patterns of clouds, the behavior of birds, and the condition of plants and soil. These observations were not casual but vital lessons that informed the family's survival strategies. For example, the appearance of certain wildflowers might signal the arrival of spring and the time to sow crops. The behavior of migratory birds could foretell the coming of storms or the approach of winter. Reading these signs allowed families to plan their activities, protect their harvests, and prepare for the cold months ahead. Oral tradition, stories as education. In the absence of written texts accessible to the general population, oral tradition was the primary vehicle for transmitting knowledge and cultural values. Elders and storytellers passed down sagas, myths, and practical wisdom through generations. These stories served multiple purposes. They entertained, educated, and reinforced social norms. Children listened to tales of gods like Odin, Thor, and Freya, whose adventures illustrated virtues such as courage, honor, and loyalty. Stories of heroes and ancestors provided models of behavior, celebrating those who exemplified Viking ideals through their deeds. More than mere fantasy, these narratives encoded important lessons about the environment, warfare, and community life. They explained the origins of customs, laws, and taboos, teaching children the complex social rules that govern their world. The early role of children. From infancy, Viking children were integrated into family life and work. Unlike modern children, who often spend long hours in schools separated from adult activities, Viking kids were active participants from the start. Their presence in daily tasks was both a learning experience and a contribution. Babies and toddlers were often carried on their mothers' backs or close by during chores, absorbing sights, sounds, and rhythms. As they grew, they took on small tasks appropriate to their age and ability, gathering kindling, tending animals, or helping with food preparation. These early responsibilities instilled a sense of duty and connection to the family. They also provided practical training that built skills over time, laying the foundation for more complex work and survival tasks. War as a constant reality. Perhaps the most striking difference between Viking childhood and modern childhood was the omnipresence of war. In many contemporary societies, children grow up largely separated from conflict, protected by laws and social norms. For Viking children, warfare was never a distant concept, but a tangible part of daily life. Raids, battles, and feuds were common occurrences. The sounds of hammer striking anvil to forge weapons, the clash of steel in training, and the smoke of burning villages were part of the backdrop to their youth. Children were aware from early on that their future might include fighting to defend their home, participating in raids, or enduring the loss of loved ones. The prospect of war shaped their education, behavior, and aspirations. Preparation for battle begins early. Boys, in particular, were introduced to the skills and mindset required for combat at a young age. The first steps towards becoming a warrior began with playmock battles with wooden swords and shields, practicing throws with sticks as spears, and learning the fundamentals of strength and agility. These activities were not merely games but training exercises designed to develop coordination, courage, and tactical thinking. As boys grew older, their training intensified under the guidance of fathers, uncles, or community warriors. Girls, while often focused more on domestic roles, were also prepared for the possibility of conflict. They learned to defend their homes with knives or other weapons, and were taught resilience and endurance. The social fabric, community, and clan. Viking childhood was deeply embedded within the social structures of family and clan. Children were taught that their identity and honor were tied to their kinship group, and that loyalty to family and clan leaders was paramount. This social context provided both support and expectation. Children were nurtured by a network of relatives and neighbors, but they were also held accountable to communal standards. The clan system ensured that knowledge, skills, and values were passed down collectively, reinforcing social cohesion and shared responsibility. Education beyond combat and survival. While survival skills and combat training were central, Viking childhood education also included lessons in law, ethics, and spirituality. Children learned about the complex legal systems that governed Viking communities, including the importance of oaths, justice, and mediation. Religious instruction introduced them to the gods and the rituals that connected them to the divine. Festivals and ceremonies marked the passage of seasons and life stages, teaching children their place within the cosmic and social order. Childhood was both harsh and nurturing. Despite the rigorous demands placed on Viking children, their upbringing was not devoid of care and affection. Families valued children deeply and sought to protect and nurture them within the constraints of their environment. Stories and lullabies soothed children, communal celebrations brought joy, and family bonds provided emotional support. This balance of toughness and tenderness helped children develop the resilience they needed while fostering a sense of belonging and security. The forge of a generation. Viking childhood was a crucible in which young boys and girls were shaped by the harshness of their environment and the richness of their culture. From the first moments of life, they were steeped in lessons of strength, endurance, loyalty, and community. Their education was not confined to one sphere, but spanned physical, mental, social, and spiritual domains, preparing them for the complexities of Viking life. They did not grow up waiting for battle. They grew up living it in every task, every story, and every season. This early forging of character and skill laid the foundation for a generation of resilient warriors, caregivers, farmers, and community members who carried the Viking legacy far beyond their homelands and into the annals of history. Early physical training. From the moment Viking children could walk, their physical education began not in schools or training halls, but in the very fabric of daily life. In a world where survival depended on strength, skill, and endurance, children were introduced early to the physical challenges they would face as adults. This training was subtle yet relentless, woven into games, chores, and imitation, shaping young bodies and minds for a future where agility and power were as vital as wisdom and loyalty. Starting young, mimicking the adults. Even toddlers observed the world around them with keen eyes. From the time they took their first steps, Viking children naturally mimicked the adults who cared for them. Toddlers often grasped sticks, pretending they were spears or axes, waving and thrusting them as if in battle. These simple acts were far more than child's play. They helped develop hand-eye coordination and muscle control crucial for hunting, fighting, and farm work. The motions of swinging, stabbing, or throwing were practiced long before a child ever held a real weapon. As these children grew, their games evolved into more structured forms of physical activity. Mock battles became common, with groups of boys and girls pairing off to wrestle or spar with wooden swords. These skirmishes, though playful, taught important lessons about balance, timing, and body control. Wrestling matches strengthened the core muscles and developed flexibility essential traits for fighting or evading attack. Races, both sprinting and endurance runs, honed cardiovascular fitness and speed, preparing children for long chases on foot during raids or hunts. For Viking boys, these activities were critical training for the future roles they would play as warriors or hunters. The physical skills required to seize prey or defend one's home were complex and demanded years of practice. Therefore, games that today might seem simple or frivolous were actually deliberate and purposeful exercises in survival skill building. Girls and physical strength. Although girls in Viking society often had responsibilities centered on the household, their physical training was no less rigorous. They learned early to carry heavy loads firewood, water vessels, or baskets of food-building endurance and strength vital for daily chores. This work demanded not only physical power, but also balance and stamina, especially in uneven terrain and harsh weather. Beyond farm and household work, Viking girls were taught to protect themselves and their homes if danger arose. Stories of shield maidens women who fought alongside men in battle were part of their cultural heritage and inspired many to learn how to wield knives or other weapons. While not all girls became warriors, the possibility was real and respected, and practical training was part of their upbringing. Additionally, girls helped with agricultural tasks such as planting and harvesting, which required stamina, precision, and physical resilience. These tasks, though less dramatic than swordplay, were equally demanding and taught girls the value of hard work and endurance. Discipline and training philosophy. Discipline in Viking childhood physical training was firm but never cruel. Elders and parents understood that courage was a quality to be cultivated with care, not forced recklessly. Children were taught to know their limits, to push themselves but avoid needless harm. Pain and failure were not shamed, but recognized as natural parts of growth. Training often took place in the context of community. Elders, skilled warriors, and experienced farmers provided guidance, correcting movements and encouraging perseverance. Lessons were often learned through storytelling, role modeling, and direct practice rather than strict drills or punishments. The philosophy of training emphasized balance, physical strength combined with mental alertness and strategic thinking. A child who could run fast but lacked patience, or a boy who swung a sword hard but without control, was not truly ready for the demands of Viking life. Hence, games and exercises often required cooperation and planning, fostering social skills alongside physical ones. Training in the context of daily life. Physical training was rarely separated from daily tasks. Chores were exercises in strength and endurance. Carrying water buckets from distant wells, chopping wood for fires, herding animals across rugged terrain, these labors built muscle and stamina over time. Children helped construct homes and boats, learning to lift heavy timbers or weave ropes, activities demanding coordination and strength. Such hands-on experiences also developed problem-solving skills and mechanical knowledge important for survival. Fishing and hunting trips were not merely work, but training opportunities. Children learned how to move silently through forests, how to read animal tracks, and how to hold a bow or spear steady. Through these activities, they gained patience, focus, and an understanding of nature's rhythms. Games as training grounds. Viking children's games were often simulations of adult challenges. Besides mock combat and wrestling, they played tag games that required quick reflexes and strategic thinking. Hide and seek taught stealth, while climbing and jumping contests built agility. Target practice with slingshots or wooden bows was common, refining aim and precision. Children might race to retrieve thrown sticks or stones, honing speed and reaction time. These games were usually communal, fostering a spirit of friendly competition and cooperation. Elders might watch and provide guidance, turning play into lessons without formal instruction. Preparation for real combat. By the age of 7 or 8, many Viking boys transitioned from wooden weapons to real ones, though still smaller and lighter versions suitable for training. Fathers and local warriors supervised their practice, teaching basic strikes, blocks, and footwork. Training also included learning to use a shield, a vital tool in both offense and defense. Shield drills taught coordination and timing, as wielding a heavy shield effectively required both strength and dexterity. Archery, too, was a critical skill. Boys practiced drawing bows and aiming at targets, sometimes from elevated positions or moving platforms, to prepare for hunting and battle. Throughout this process, emphasis was placed on precision, control, and patience. A well-aimed arrow or a carefully timed block was more valuable than brute force. Mental and emotional conditioning. Physical training was inseparable from mental conditioning. Children learned to face fear, to endure pain, and to recover from failure. Stories of gods and heroes taught them about bravery, honor, and sacrifice. They heard of warriors who faced impossible odds and prevailed through cleverness and willpower. Lessons in loyalty to family, clan, and leader were imparted early. Children understood that their actions affected not only themselves but their entire community. Parents and elders encouraged self-control. Recklessness was discouraged. Instead, courage was defined as knowing when to fight and when to retreat. The role of ritual and ceremony. Rites of passage marked stages in physical development and readiness for battle. A boy's first handling of a sword or spear was often a community event, celebrated with feasts and prayers for protection. Such moments reinforced identity and responsibility. Similarly, girls' passage into adulthood included ceremonies that recognized their readiness to assume household and, if needed, defensive roles. These rituals tied individual growth to cultural values and the collective well-being of the Viking community. Girls as defenders and providers. While boys focused more on warrior skills, girls' physical training prepared them for the many roles they played in Viking society. They learned to run errands, herd animals, and carry heavy loads over rough terrain, skills that demanded stamina and strength. Girls also trained to use weapons to protect the homestead during raids or conflicts. Knife handling and basic defense techniques were part of their education. In some stories and historical accounts, girls grew into shield maidens, women warriors, who commanded respect on the battlefield, showing that physical training was not strictly divided by gender. The foundation of Viking strength. The early physical training Viking children received was comprehensive, blending play, chores, and mentorship into a holistic education in survival. It prepared them not just to wield weapons, but to endure hardship, work cooperatively, and think strategically. This foundation helped create a generation capable of sailing far from home, engaging in fierce battle, and building resilient communities amid the rigors of the North. In every stone thrown, every wrestling match, and every lesson learned in the wild, Viking children took their first steps toward becoming the warriors and survivors who defined their age. Weapons and combat skills. By the time Viking children reached the age of 7 or 8, their training took a more serious turn. No longer were their weapons mere toys or props in playful battles. They began to handle real tools of war, wooden practice swords, spears carved from strong branches, and shields made of layered wood. These training implements were simple and rough by modern standards, but they were crafted with purpose and carried the weight of centuries of martial tradition. The aim of this early weapons training was never just to build muscle or toughness. It was to instill a deep understanding of combat's flow, the rhythm, the timing, and the instincts necessary to survive a battle. Learning to wield weapons effectively required patience and discipline. Children were taught the fundamental offensive moves, how to strike with accuracy at vital points on an opponent's body, how to use the weight of a weapon to maximize impact without sacrificing balance or control. But just as important were defensive techniques. Young Vikings learned how to parry incoming blows with quick, precise movements, and how to use their shields not just as passive barriers, but as active tools to deflect, bash, or create openings for counterattack. These skills were imparted through demonstration and hands-on practice, with parents, seasoned warriors, and community leaders playing vital roles as teachers and mentors. In many households, the father or eldest brother served as the first instructor, guiding the young warrior's grip on sword or spear, correcting stance, and emphasizing the importance of footwork. Community gatherings often doubled as training grounds, where experienced fighters would oversee drills and teach tactics passed down from their ancestors. These lessons were more than physical, they were strategic. Children were taught to read an opponent's body language, anticipate attacks, and understand when to strike or retreat. Archery held a special place in Viking combat training. The bow was a weapon of skill, requiring focus, patience, and precision qualities developed from a young age. Boys were introduced to smaller bows appropriate for their size and learned to shoot at targets of increasing difficulty. This practice helped refine their hand-eye coordination and taught them breath control and steady concentration, crucial for delivering lethal shots during hunting or warfare. Mastering archery was more than a means of self-defense. It was a vital contribution to the family's survival. A skilled archer could provide food by hunting deer, birds, or small game, or defend the household from distant threats. In Viking raids, archers often formed the front lines, raining arrows upon foes before close combat began. As such, early training in the bow equipped children with versatile skills that extended beyond mere battlefield prowess. Training was not always conducted individually. In many communities, children formed small groups or cohorts for exercises, fostering camaraderie and teamwork. These sessions involved mock battles, coordinated attacks, and defensive formations that mirrored the realities of Viking warfare. Working together to execute maneuvers reinforced social bonds and taught young warriors the importance of unity and discipline in the chaos of battle. Group training also helped children learn to trust one another, communicate through gestures or shouted commands, and respond quickly to changing situation skills, essential not only in combat, but in the closely knit Viking communities, where cooperation ensured collective survival. The values of loyalty and brotherhood were instilled early, shaping not just fighters but citizens ready to defend their homes and kin. Alongside physical practice, children absorbed lessons in the cultural significance of their weapons. Swords were not just tools but symbols of honor, inheritance, and identity. Receiving a sword could be a rite of passage, marking the transition from childhood to adulthood. Shields bore family emblems or were decorated with runes, reinforcing a sense of belonging and pride. These symbols served as reminders that warfare was intertwined with personal and communal honor. Beyond swordsmanship and archery, children were exposed to other combat skills like spear throwing, knot tying for securing weapons or setting traps, and even basic tactics for siege or defense. Storytelling also played a role in teaching combat lesson skalds, recited epic tales of battles won through cunning, bravery, or clever strategy, providing both inspiration and practical wisdom. Girls, while traditionally less involved in formal combat roles, were not excluded from basic weapons training. Especially in times of danger, they were expected to defend their homes, and many learned to use knives or small axes. The legendary shield maidens, though exceptional, highlight that physical training for battle was possible and respected for women as well. As Viking children progressed through these stages of weapons and combat training, they did so in a culture that revered martial skill, but also understood its limits. Courage was prized, but reckless bravado was discouraged. Discipline, awareness, and respect for one's opponent and comrades were emphasized. This balanced approach ensured that young warriors grew not only strong but wise, prepared not only to fight, but to survive and lead. In sum, Viking weapons training was a holistic education rooted in physical drills, strategic thinking, cultural values, and social cohesion. It equipped children with the skills necessary for the brutal realities of their world, while fostering the character and unity that made Viking society resilient. Through wooden swords, spears, and bows, they inherited a legacy of warrior spiritone that shaped not just battles but the very identity of a people who thrived against the harshest odds. Mental and emotional training. Physical strength and combat skills were crucial for survival in the Viking world, but they alone were not enough. The true essence of a Viking warrior and community member was forged in the mind and spirit as much as in the body. Mental and emotional training played a vital role in shaping children into resilient, courageous, and loyal individuals who could withstand the hardships of a harsh environment and the chaos of war. This deeper education prepared them not only to fight, but to endure, to lead, and to uphold the complex social and moral fabric that held Viking society together. Foundations of Viking mental strength. From early childhood, Viking boys and girls were immersed in a cultural environment where resilience was a defining virtue. The stark realities of life, the biting cold, the scarcity of food, the threat of enemies were ever present. Children quickly learned that hardship was not an exception but the norm. They watched their parents endure long winters, carry heavy burdens, and face dangers with stoicism. From these daily observations, they internalized the importance of mental toughness. Parents and elders did not shield children from pain or fear. Rather, they taught that these feelings were natural but manageable. Fear was acknowledged as a valid emotion, but framed as something to be mastered, not avoided. A young Viking might feel the sting of cold or the ache of exhaustion, but they were encouraged to push through, to channel discomfort into determination. This approach was rooted in the belief that courage was not the absence of fear, but the will to face it. Children were taught that true bravery meant standing firm in the face of danger, making sacrifices for the greater good, and honoring promises even when it was difficult. The lessons of endurance were as important as lessons in wielding an axe or aiming a bow. Stories as moral guides. Integral to the mental and emotional education of Viking children were the stories of gods, heroes, and ancestors that formed the backbone of their cultural identity. These narratives were not just entertaining tales, but moral compasses that conveyed ideals of bravery, loyalty, honor, and sacrifice. Children grew up hearing of Odin, the all-wise god who sacrificed his eye for knowledge, of Thor, whose mighty hammer protected gods and humans alike, of Freya, the fierce goddess of love and battle. These deities embodied qualities that Vikings aspired to: wisdom, strength, protection, and passion. Equally vital were the sagas of mortal heroes who exemplified these divine traits. Stories told of warriors who fought to the death rather than retreat, who sacrificed themselves to save kin or clan, and who faced overwhelming odds with steadfast resolve. These narratives served as blueprints for conduct, teaching children that honor was earned through deeds, that loyalty to family and tribe was paramount, and that the ultimate reward was a place in Valhalla or a respected memory among their people. By hearing and internalizing these stories, children absorbed the cultural expectation that hardship was not only to be endured but embraced as a pathway to glory and social acceptance. The sagas provided them with models of virtue to emulate and helped frame their personal struggles as part of a larger heroic tradition. Facing fear and pain. Viking culture recognized that fear and pain were unavoidable elements of life, especially in a world marked by violence and unpredictability. Rather than suppress these emotions, families taught children to confront them directly. From a young age, children might be exposed to controlled challenges designed to build resilience. A boy might be asked to spend a night alone in the woods to prove his bravery, or to endure a cold river crossing during a hunting trip. Girls might learn to manage pain through lessons in endurance during physically demanding tasks, such as childbirth or labor. These experiences were intended to toughen both body and spirit, teaching children that discomfort was temporary and could be overcome through willpower. Pain was reframed as a test of character. To endure it without complaint was a mark of strength and honor. Parents provided guidance and reassurance, sharing their own stories of hardship and survival to normalize suffering and inspire perseverance. They taught that courage was not recklessness, but a measured response grounded in respect for danger and self-control. The role of rituals and rites of passage. The progression from childhood to adulthood was marked by significant rituals and rites of passage that reinforced mental and emotional growth. These ceremonies were communal events that underscored a young person's readiness to take on greater responsibilities. One common rite was the first handling of a weapon, often a wooden sword or spear. This event was symbolic, representing the child's entry into the world of warriors and defenders. It might be accompanied by blessings from elders or prayers to the gods, emphasizing that physical prowess must be matched by moral integrity. Another rite could be the first hunting trip, where a child learned to provide for the family, demonstrating patience, skill, and self-reliance. Success in such endeavors was celebrated and often recorded in oral histories, creating a sense of pride and belonging. These rites were not only personal milestones, but public acknowledgments of a child's transition. They instilled a deep sense of duty, connecting individuals to their community's collective identity and reinforcing the social bonds that held Viking society together. Building loyalty and social cohesion. Loyalty was a cornerstone of Viking mental training. Children were taught early that their actions affected not only themselves, but also their family, clan, and community. Loyalty to one's kin and lord was paramount, and betrayal was among the greatest sins. This sense of loyalty extended beyond personal relationships to encompass a commitment to shared values and mutual protection. Children learned the importance of standing by their comrades in battle and supporting their neighbors in times of need. The mental discipline required for loyalty was cultivated through stories, laws, and daily interactions. Young Vikings heard tales of friendships forged in fire, alliances sealed by blood, and the heavy consequences of breaking oaths. These lessons created a tightly woven social fabric where trust and honor were essential for survival. Mental preparation for the realities of war. Beyond individual virtues, children were gradually prepared for the psychological realities of warfare. They learned that battle was chaotic and terrifying, but also a place where courage and discipline could turn the tide. Parents and warriors shared experiences of fear, loss, and grief, teaching children that such emotions were natural and that mourning was part of a warrior's life. They emphasized the importance of keeping calm under pressure, following orders, and maintaining solidarity with fellow fighters. Young Vikings were also taught the concept of fate known as word, which imbued life and death with meaning. Understanding that one's time was predestined helped warriors face the possibility of death without despair, fostering a stoic acceptance that reinforced mental resilience. Education through storytelling and practice. Mental and emotional training was continuous and integrated into daily life. Storytelling was a powerful medium, weaving lessons into memorable narratives that children could relate to and learn from. Skalds, the Viking poets, played an important role in preserving and transmitting cultural values through epic tales. Practice and repetition cemented these lessons. Through participation in family and community events, children internalized behavioral expectations. Observing and emulating elders provided living examples of courage, loyalty, and resilience in action. Even leisure activities contributed to mental development. Games and competitions tested not just physical skills, but strategic thinking, patience, and emotional control. These experiences built confidence and prepared children to navigate the complexities of social and martial life, balancing hardship with nurture. Despite the emphasis on toughness, Viking upbringing also included nurture and care. Parents and elders recognized the need for emotional support, especially in the face of loss or hardship. Affection was expressed through stories, songs, and shared rituals. Children were comforted in times of sickness or fear, often through appeals to protective spirits or gods. This blend of emotional care and mental training created a balanced approach that allowed children to develop resilience without becoming hardened or detached. Legacy of mental and emotional training. The mental and emotional preparation Viking children received was as critical as their physical training. It created individuals capable of facing fear and pain with courage, committed to their communities, and guided by a rich moral framework. This holistic education shaped the legendary Viking warriors and leaders whose deeds echo through history. More importantly, it sustained families and communities through the relentless challenges of their environment. Through rituals, stories, and lived experience, Viking children grew into adults who carried forward a legacy of resilience, honor, and unyielding will, a legacy that remains powerful and inspiring today. Survival skills and everyday training. In the Viking world, survival hinged not only on combat prowess, but on an intricate web of practical skills that sustained life amid harsh climates, unpredictable seasons, and often scarce resources. For Viking children, learning these survival skills was a daily reality woven seamlessly into their upbringing. Beyond mastering swordplay and battle tactics, young Vikings developed a profound understanding of farming, fishing, weather, toolmaking, food preservation, and social cooperation. These competencies were essential not only for individual survival, but for the resilience and continuity of entire communities. Early introduction to farming and fishing. From their earliest years, Viking children were taught to contribute meaningfully to the household economy. Life was intimately connected to the land and sea, and survival depended on respecting and understanding these sources. Boys and girls both participated in farming tasks, learning to till soil, sow seed, and tend crops. They became familiar with the rhythms of the agricultural calendar, the bitter work of spring plowing, the hopeful planting of barley and rye, the careful tending of growing fields, and the laborious harvest before the onset of winter. While tending to crops, children absorbed crucial knowledge about soil quality, moisture levels, and pest signs, skills passed down from generation to generation. They learned which plots produce the best yields, how to rotate crops to avoid soil exhaustion, and how to protect fields from frost or flood. These lessons were essential in a land where the growing season might last only 90 days, and a single misstep could mean famine. Alongside farming, fishing was a central component of survival training, particularly for children living near coastlines or rivers. Children accompanied parents or older siblings on fishing expeditions, learning to cast nets, set traps, and recognize the signs of fish movement in the water. They learned how tides and weather affected the best times to fish, and how to repair nets and boats damaged by storms or wear. Fishing trips were not only labor but education. Children were taught to read the water, identify bird patterns signaling shoals of fish, and understand the dangers posed by tides and currents. These experiences built respect for the sea's power and unpredictability, as well as the skills necessary to harvest its bounty safely and efficiently. Reading the environment, weather, and animal tracking. A vital survival skill passed on to Viking children was the ability to interpret natural signs, particularly weather patterns and animal behavior. In a world where sudden storms or harsh winters could devastate communities, the ability to read the skies was life-saving. Children learned to observe cloud formations, wind direction, and the behavior of birds and animals as natural weather predictors. For example, the sudden silence of birds could herald an approaching storm, while the flight of certain species might indicate changes in wind or temperature. Elders taught children that a red sky at dawn or dusk could foretell rain or fair weather, piece of wisdom still remembered in the saying, "Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning." Animal tracking was another critical skill. Children learned to identify footprints, scat, and markings that revealed the presence and movement of game animals such as deer, elk, or boar. Tracking was essential, not only for hunting, but for understanding the safety and stability of the local environment. These lessons were hands-on and continuous. Children followed adults into forests and fields, learning by doing, by watching, and by asking questions. Such intimate knowledge of the environment equipped them to find food, avoid danger, and plan for seasonal changes. Foraging for edible plants and medicinal herbs. Viking children also gained practical knowledge about foraging, a skill crucial during times when cultivated crops were insufficient or during long winters when stored food ran low. In the warmer months, children and their families ventured into forests, marshes, and along seashores to gather edible greens, berries, roots, and herbs. They learned to recognize safe plants such as nettles, dandelion leaves, wild garlic, sorrel, and sea kalean, distinguish them from poisonous varieties. This knowledge was passed down carefully, as a mistake could be fatal. Berry picking was a particular delight. Bilberries, wild strawberries, cloudberries, and crowberries were gathered not only for immediate consumption, but dried or preserved to last through winter. Children developed a keen eye for ripeness and learned the best locations and times to harvest. Beyond food, children were introduced to medicinal plants, learning which herbs could soothe ailments, heal wounds, or improve digestion. These included yarrow for stopping bleeding, chamomile for calming nerves, and juniper berries for infections. Mastery of herbal lore was a respected skill, often held by wise women or elders, but introduced early to ensure survival knowledge was preserved. Mastering fire and shelter construction. Knowing how to make and maintain fire was a fundamental survival skill every Viking child needed to master. Fire provided warmth, cooked food, and protected against predators and darkness. Children were taught how to gather suitable tinder and kindling, how to strike flint stones or use other primitive methods to spark flames, and how to nurture a fire safely. Fire making was both practical and ritualistic. Lighting the hearth each morning was a communal act that signified the household's life force. Children learned to tend the fire throughout the day, understanding when to add wood or embers to maintain steady heat without wasting fuel. They also learned fire safety, how to prevent accidental blazes in turf homes filled with dry materials. Shelter construction was another key lesson. From a young age, children helped build and repair homes, barns, and fences using timber, stone, sod, and animal hides. They learned to arrange beams for structural strength, thatch roofs to shed rain and snow, and insulate walls against cold. Temporary shelters for hunting or fishing trips taught them how to create windbreaks and use natural materials for protection. This hands-on building experience nurtured practical problem-solving skills and an understanding of how to adapt human needs to the natural world. It prepared children to survive both in settled villages and during the hardships of travel or conflict. Learning food preservation techniques. Food preservation was the backbone of Viking survival through long winters and unpredictable harvests. From childhood, Viking boys and girls were trained in the essential arts of drying, smoking, fermenting, and salting food. Drying fish and meats involved hanging them on wooden racks exposed to cold, dry winds. Children participated in preparing fish gutting, filleting, and stringing them up, learning how to arrange the racks for optimal airflow and protection from scavengers. Smoking was practiced in smokehouses, where children helped tend the slow-burning fires that infused fish and meat with preservative smoke. They learned the importance of selecting the right wood. Alder or juniperto impart flavor and antibacterial properties. Fermentation was another skill taught with care. Children observed the preparation of sour milk, pickled vegetables, and fermented fish, a pungent but valuable food source during winter. They helped prepare fermentation vessels, monitored temperature and time, and learned to identify safe from spoiled fermentations. Salting was especially prized, as salt was a precious resource traded widely. Children learned to pack barrels tightly with layers of fish and coarse salt, then seal and store them properly. They understood that proper salting prevented spoilage, and that insufficient salt could lead to devastating losses. These food preservation techniques were taught as family secrets, passed down with ritual respect. Mastery meant the difference between hunger and plenty and was vital for community survival. Social skills through communal work and ritual. Viking survival was not an individual endeavor, but a communal one. From childhood, children were taught the importance of cooperation, trust, and respect within their families and villages. Communal work such as harvesting, fishing, building, or food processing was a social education. Children learned to coordinate their efforts with others, share tools and resources, and contribute to the group's success. The value of teamwork was deeply ingrained, as no single person could survive alone in the Viking world. Rituals and festivals further cemented social bonds. Children participated in seasonal celebrations that marked planting, harvest, solstices, and religious observances. These events reinforced a sense of belonging, taught cultural values, and allowed children to observe the social hierarchy and roles they would eventually assume. Respect for elders, leaders, and kin was emphasized continuously. Children learned that social harmony and loyalty were as essential as physical skills. They understood that their actions impacted not only themselves, but the survival and honor of their families and communities, developing resourcefulness and adaptability. The daily training Viking children received was not rigid or formulaic. Instead, it fostered resourcefulness and adaptability, qualities necessary to thrive in an unpredictable and often hostile environment. Children were encouraged to observe closely, experiment with techniques, and think creatively about solving problems. Whether figuring out how to repair a torn fishing net, finding alternative food sources, or adapting shelter to new weather conditions, their education emphasized flexible thinking. This culture of innovation was essential for managing scarcity and weathering crises, such as crop failure, harsh winters, or raids. Resourcefulness was celebrated and taught as a form of intelligence and courage, preparing for the harsh realities ahead. By the time Viking children reached adolescence, they had acquired a broad base of survival skills, from tending crops and catching fish to making fire, preserving food, and cooperating in communal tasks. These practical competencies were complemented by mental and emotional resilience training, creating well-rounded individuals prepared to face the dangers and demands of their world. The transition from childhood to adulthood was marked by rites of passage that symbolized readiness to assume full responsibilities. Mastery of survival skills was often demonstrated publicly, reinforcing community expectations and personal pride. Ultimately, the survival skills and everyday training imparted to Viking children were fundamental not only to their individual lives, but to the continued existence of their families, villages, and broader society. Through hands-on experience, mentorship, and cultural transmission, each generation was equipped to navigate the challenges of a difficult land and uphold a legacy of endurance and cooperation. The role of family and community. In Viking society, the task of raising and training children was never seen as the responsibility of parents alone. Instead, it was a communal endeavor, deeply woven into the fabric of family ties, village life, and social networks. From birth onward, children were nurtured not only by their immediate kin, but also by elders, warriors, skilled craftspeople, and neighbors who each played distinct roles in shaping the next generation. This collective upbringing was essential in preparing Viking children for the complex challenges of their world, a world where survival, honor, and loyalty were communal responsibilities as much as individual traits. The village, as a living classroom. Unlike the structured classrooms of today, the Viking village functioned as an expansive, living school without walls or formal teachers. Every part of the community, from the longhouses clustered near the fjord to the workshops and fields, served as a place of learning. Children did not simply receive instruction, they absorbed knowledge through constant observation and active participation in daily life. Young Vikings were keen observers, watching how elders handled tools, how warriors prepared for battle, how farmers tended the fields. They absorbed lessons in etiquette, craft, warfare, and spirituality by being present and involved. This hands-on education allowed them to acquire practical skills and cultural values simultaneously. The village's social and physical layout encouraged this immersive learning. Communal spaces like hearths, meeting halls, and marketplaces were venues where stories were told, disputes resolved, and decisions made, all of which children witnessed and gradually came to understand. Workshops where blacksmiths forged weapons, weavers spun yarn, and boat builders crafted vessels were not closed-off areas, but hubs where young apprentices worked alongside masters, learning through direct engagement. Elders and mentors, the keepers of knowledge. Elders held a revered status in Viking society as living repositories of history, law, and tradition. Their wisdom was essential in guiding children's moral and practical education. They recounted tales of gods and ancestors, imparted lessons on honor and loyalty, and advised on social customs and dispute resolution. For young Vikings, elders provided not just knowledge but a sense of continuity, a link to a past that legitimized present actions and future hopes. Their stories were not idle myths but teachings embedded with meaning, inspiring children to embody the virtues that had sustained their people for generations. In addition to elders, experienced warriors and skilled craftspeople played crucial mentoring roles. Talented youths, whether inclined toward battle, craftsmanship, or agriculture, were often identified early and paired with seasoned mentors. A boy with promise in combat might apprentice under a respected fighter, learning swordsmanship, tactics, and leadership. Others might follow a master smith or shipbuilder, gaining skills essential for economic and military success. Mentorship was personalized and relational, based on trust and respect. It extended beyond mere skill transmission to include guidance on ethics, decision-making, and community roles. This system ensured that knowledge was preserved, adapted, and passed on, maintaining the cultural cohesion and practical expertise of Viking society. Family, the heart of social identity. Family was the cornerstone of Viking life, shaping a child's identity, responsibilities, and social standing. The household was not just a physical dwelling, but a nexus of lineage, honor, and loyalty. Children understood from an early age that their actions bore consequences beyond themselves. They reflected on their parents, siblings, and ancestors. The concept of family honor was pervasive and powerful. Achievements in battle, reputation for fairness, and acts of generosity enhanced a family's standing, while failures or dishonor could tarnish it for generations. Parents taught children that personal conduct was inseparable from familial pride, and that loyalty to kin was a sacred duty. This focus on family honor instilled a strong sense of belonging and accountability. Children learned to support one another, share resources, and uphold collective values. The family acted as a support network, providing protection, education, and economic stability. It also served as the primary context in which children developed their sense of self and moral framework. Clan and kinship networks. Beyond the immediate family, larger kinship networks, the clan or extended family, played significant roles in social and economic life. Clans were composed of multiple related households bound by blood or marriage, united by mutual obligations and defense. Children were socialized into these wider networks, learning the importance of alliances and cooperation. Kinship ties created a broad safety net that could be mobilized in times of conflict or hardship. This collective responsibility reinforced values of trust, loyalty, and mutual aid. Within clans, the concept of reciprocity was central. Families exchanged goods, services, and support, creating intricate relationships of indebtedness and gratitude. Children witnessed these exchanges and were taught that maintaining social harmony was essential for survival and prosperity. Education in social roles and responsibilities. The community's role extended to educating children about their social roles and responsibilities. Through participation in festivals, rituals, and communal work, children learned the expectations placed upon them. Festivals marked agricultural cycles, religious observances, and historical commemorations. Children helped prepare for these events, learning rituals, songs, and dances that reinforced shared identity and values. Participation in such communal activities taught cooperation, respect for tradition, and the importance of contributing to the common good. Children also observed the roles of leaders, warriors, priests, and craftspeople, gradually understanding the social hierarchy and their potential place within it. This awareness helped them internalize discipline, ambition, and service. Gender roles and training. Within the community context, gender roles were both defined and flexible. Boys typically followed paths oriented toward warfare, leadership, or craft, while girls were more engaged in domestic management, agriculture, and sometimes healing or spiritual roles. However, exceptions existed, and the community's collective approach allowed for adaptation according to individual talents and needs. Girls were socialized to manage households and care for family members, roles vital to social stability and survival. They learned practical skills alongside moral teachings, preparing to become mothers, managers, and sometimes defenders of the home. Boys were trained not only in combat skills, but also in leadership and community defense. They observed and assisted in warfare preparations, participated in hunting, and learned the importance of protecting kin. Conflict resolution and law. Another critical component of communal upbringing was education in conflict resolution and law. Viking communities operated under complex legal systems rooted in customs and assemblies known as things. Children learned early that justice, honor, and social order were maintained through negotiation, mediation, and sometimes ritualized combat. They observed elders resolving disputes, witnessed oath-taking ceremonies, and understood that maintaining peace was essential to community survival. This legal consciousness fostered respect for authority and encouraged children to act responsibly within social structures. The community's role in emotional and moral development. The community also contributed significantly to the emotional and moral development of children. Through shared experiences, both joyous and tragic children learned empathy, resilience, and ethical behavior. Communal grieving, celebration, and storytelling reinforced bonds and helped children process complex emotions. The social fabric provided a network of care that balanced the demands of a harsh world with the need for emotional support. Preparing for adulthood. Ultimately, the role of family and community was to prepare children for the responsibilities and challenges of adulthood. This preparation was holistic, encompassing physical skills, mental resilience, social knowledge, and moral integrity. As children grew, they took on more significant roles within family and community, moving gradually from observation to active participation. Mentorship and communal reinforcement ensured that the knowledge and values essential to Viking life were transmitted seamlessly from one generation to the next. In Viking society, the community was more than a backdrop. It was an active, dynamic school where children learned the skills, values, and social roles that would define their lives. The involvement of elders, warriors, craftsmen, and neighbors created a rich educational environment that extended far beyond the family unit. The emphasis on family honor, loyalty, and social cohesion ensured that children grew into adults ready to uphold the legacy of their people. This collective approach to upbringing forged resilient individuals and communities capable of facing the harsh realities of Viking life, leaving a lasting imprint on the culture and history of the Norse world. The legacy of Viking childhood. When we look back at the Viking Age, our minds often picture fierce warriors charging into battle, fearless seafarers navigating unknown waters, and kings or jarls wielding power with iron fists. Yet, beneath these iconic images lies a deeper, more nuanced story, the story of Viking childhood. It is a tale of relentless preparation for a life where survival was far from guaranteed, and where the stakes were not just personal glory, but the continued existence of family, community, and culture. Viking children were trained not only to wield weapons and fight wars, but to live within a demanding environment where strength, skill, and social bonds were essential. Their upbringing was rigorous, comprehensive, and holistic, encompassing physical endurance, mental resilience, strategic thinking, and moral grounding. From the moment of birth, they were immersed in lessons that extended far beyond simple survival tactics. Their education forged bodies capable of withstanding harsh climates and brutal battles, minds adept at navigating complex social and military landscapes, and spirits resilient enough to endure loss, hardship, and uncertainty. This multifaceted training produced individuals who were more than warriors. They became nurturing parents who passed down vital knowledge and values. They were farmers skilled in coaxing life from the stubborn northern soil. They were community members who understood the importance of cooperation, loyalty, and shared responsibility. The Viking child's journey was from innocence to preparedness, from play to duty transformation, essential to the era's enduring legacy. The saga of the Vikings remains incomplete if we overlook the formative years that shaped these resilient individuals. The hardships faced and overcome in childhood, learning to read the land and sea, mastering weapons, understanding social obligations, and cultivating emotional fortitude created the foundation upon which Viking society stood. These children, growing up amid storms, both literal and figurative, became the men and women who carried the torch of their culture, spreading its influence far and wide. Their legacy endures not only in historical texts and archaeological finds, but in the enduring fascination we hold for their spirit and achievements. It is a legacy that reminds us how childhood shapes the future, how resilience and community are as vital as strength and skill, and how the lessons learned in youth can ripple across generations. Thank you for joining this journey into Viking childhood. If you enjoyed this exploration of history and culture, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What other aspects of Viking life would you like to uncover? Let us know.